How's it going, everyone? Today I got two stories for you. The first story is about a spoiled brat who pulls the fire alarm because he doesn't get what he wants. And the next one is of a spoiled rich kid who thinks he's better than you. Enjoy. Anyways, let's call the subscriber who submitted this story Mike. And oh my god, my nose is clogged. So anyways, right, Mike had this huge test coming up, and everyone else in his class was preparing for it. The teacher was talking for weeks, like, this is really big. You guys really need to study for this. And, Mike admits that he didn't do the smartest thing, and Mike ended up not studying for it at all. So about a couple days before the test, Mike had not studied, and, it had been, told to everyone, you need to study / prepare for this for weeks. Like, you need to do it. There's no other way around it. Like, that's just how it's going to go. And Mike was a little bit concerned because the truth was he had just not been preparing for it at all. So Mike knew this other kid in class who we're just going to call Spoiled Kid. He wasn't necessarily, that close with Mike, but they were friendly enough, right? And, Mike went up to him and said, hey, man, have you, studied for this at all? And the Spoiled Kid's like, nah. So that immediately made, Mike feel better, and it's like, oh, I feel like everyone else is. And the Spoiled Kid's like, no, everyone I talked to just totally hasn't, which ended up not being the case, right? Ended up not being the case that everyone else had not been studying. Oh, my God, my nose. But either way, the Spoiled Kid was like, you know what, dude, you and I, let's just go into this raw. Okay, that was a bad way of saying it. Let's just go into this, unprepared. Let's just kind of spitball this test. Let's just do it. Let's freestyle this test, man. I think we can do it without even trying. We can go in. We don't even need to study. I don't think anyone else is studying. It's going to be totally fine. So, Mike, heard this and was kind of thinking to himself, I don't know. Because, probably should prepare for a test that is really big and that everyone else is preparing for and that you're told you need to prepare for. Probably should be preparing for that, right? But anyways, Mike also has not been preparing. He doesn't want to study because that's not fun. And the Spoiled Kid was, Mike was basically pretending like the Spoiled Kid was making a point to make himself feel better. He's like, yeah, man, you know what? You and I were in this together. Mike tells me, because he submitted this story to my Instagram, which you can submit stories to my Instagram or Twitter. Just make sure you follow them first and then DM me. He says that this was a bad idea and that he wants to tell everyone that if there's a big test, you should study for it and that you will not be able to just, do it off brim. You won't just be able to do it from, scratch most of the time. This is not a good idea. But anyways, right? So Mike ends up not studying at all. And the day before the test, he goes up to one of his friends. He's like, hey, man, have you, studied for this test? And his friend kind of looks at him with this kind of look of, obviously. And he's like, yeah, dude, I've spent the last 2 weeks, you know how big this is? And he's like, have you? And Mike's like, yeah, no, I have. Totally, man. I've been studying. And the truth was Mike had not done a single lick of work before this point. So when he went back home, Mike tried to cram it all before. And a lesson you guys will definitely learn if you haven't learned this already is if you got a big test, don't save it all to the night before, because that's not how really you learn information. Give yourself a couple days, maybe a week if that's better for you, or kind of depending on how much content you got to learn. It's not good to do it all the night before. It can be done, but you're probably not going to get your best result. So Mike went, home that night, pulled out all of his papers, and kind of realized that it was too big to do anything. And sometimes when it's I've never done this, but I've definitely heard people say, when you have just so much work, you decide to do none of it. Terrible idea, but it's kind of the feeling of you're overwhelmed, so you don't even try doing any of it. Just do a little bit. Even if it's in this case, at least do a little bit so you have a little bit. You won't completely bomb the test, you'll just mostly. But anyways, the next day comes around. It's the day of the big test, and Mike meets up with the Spoiled Kid. He's like, all right, you're ready to just to spitball this, right? Just to do it off the brim, just do with no preparation. The Spoiled Kid's like, yeah, man, I'm not even worried. We can totally do it. We're smart people. They were in 8th grade, so this logic still made sense. And they go into the test. And Mike and the Spoiled Kid sit next to each other. Not so that, maybe share answers, but it's not like they're going to have any answers that are worth sharing. So they get the teacher goes around, so says, all right, guys, I know you've been preparing for a while for this. I got a feeling that if you studied, you will do well, and I can almost guarantee that. If you've not studied, well, best of luck. And that was like the most ominous thing that Mike and the spoiled kid could have heard, because he literally said, like, hey, he basically said, hey, Mike and spoiled kid, you guys are screwed, bro, lol. I mean, he didn't say that exactly, but you know what I mean. And so there, the teacher walks around, hands out the tests, and one thing that Mike does, and something that I do as well, is when you get the test, you open it up and you look at all the pages. Because you just want to see, exactly what the questions are going to be. You want to get a sense of like, okay, it's going to cover all these topics. And by the end of skimming all the pages, which the spoiled kid did as well, Mike realized he was screwed. Because this was a type of test that was kind of testing specific information that was outlined in the study guide, but it wasn't really a test that you could just figure out if you didn't prepare. And Mike and the spoiled kid came to that realization pretty quickly. So spoiled kid looks over at him and kind of has this look of like, oh no, bro. Oh no. Kind of this look of like, this isn't going to be good. Like this is going to be really bad. Kind of a look of that. And at this point, Mike realized that deciding to just, free ball this, do it off the brim, was a terrible idea. It was a really bad idea. And he's kind of just sitting there, and he hears the spoiled kid whisper, like, dude, don't worry, I'm going to get us out of this. And he sees the spoiled kid raise his hand, and the teacher comes over and he says, can I go to the bathroom? And the teacher's like, all right, well, just leave your phone here. Because a lot of kids would try and go up to the bathroom. They go on their phone, they look up the answer they don't know, and then they come back and put it down. So that's fair enough. Spoiled kid takes out his phone, puts it down. And so the spoiled kid, he basically said, like, I'm going to fix this for us. And Mike kind of looks at him and then he said that a second ago, but Mike's trying to figure out why that is. Spoiled kid hands in his phone. The teacher, grabs the phone, puts it at the front desk, and, the spoiled kid gets up and walks out. So at this point, Mike's kind of like, okay, I don't know what he means by that, but it's not like I'm doing good right now. So he's sitting there, at this point, Mike is just there trying to find answers for the test, trying to figure out how to do it. He's really trying to reason his way out of, this situation because he doesn't really know otherwise. And the problem is he can figure out two questions out of the 25. So he's like, all right, I'm looking at a 2 out of 25. That's not great. Hopefully there's a 23-point curve. But I don't think that's how it's going to go. And in the middle of trying to figure out one of the questions, he's kind of jolted up because a really loud noise kind of happens. And he's just like, okay, I wonder what this is. And then he looks up, and sure enough, it is the fire alarm. There's the flashing white light. There's the noise. The teacher's like, oh, shoot, bro. Damn. Because I don't know, I feel like the teacher, because the thing is, teacher only has so much time. Now he has to give them extra time, and then they can go back home. It's always a problem when the test is interrupted. So the teacher's like, all right, guys, get your stuff together. The fire alarm, we all got get up in an orderly line or whatever. And Mike doesn't initially put together the 2 and 2. He thinks it's a random coincidence. He's like, oh my God, I'm saved. We just had the fire alarm. This is perfect. I'll be able to go home and look up some of these answers. This is this act of God just saved me. Little did Mike know that this was no act or no random action, right? This was not some crazy RNG luck or anything. This was just this was the work of someone else, right? And he will soon know this because he's walking out and he realizes that, spoiled kid's still in the bathroom. I really hope that he got out in time, or I don't know. I hope he's not stuck inside or something. Because at first, he wasn't sure if this was a drill or a legitimate fire. But eventually, he sees the spoiled kid walking out of the building. And he's like, okay, word, great. And the spoiled kid goes in line, and the teacher's like, all right, well, here's the last guy. Points to spoiled kid. We got everyone here. Everyone wait here. I'm going to go report that we have everyone. So the teacher walks up to the other teachers that have their clipboards and their, whatever, the attendance sheets. And the spoiled kid, says, psst, Mike. And Mike turns around, he says, and the spoiled kid just says, you're welcome, man. And Mike kind of looked at him like, what do you mean by that? Like, what do you mean by you're welcome? And spoiled kid's like, dude, like, just you're welcome. Just gave you an opportunity, and now we're not going to fail the test. And Mike's like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Spoiled kid's like, come on, man. Like, don't be stupid. And Mike just looks at him. And, like, if you were watching Mike's facial expressions, it was like the little gear inside of Mike's head starts to turn, and you can see it in his eyes when he puts two and two together and realizes that it was the spoiled kid that pulled the fire alarm. It was not a accident that happened to work out in his favor. It was the spoiled kid who pulled the fire alarm. So at this point, Mike looks at him. He's like, dude, like, you're, what? Did you pull the fire? And he's like, yes, obviously. Come on, Mike. Come on, Mike. Let's get together. A little faster here. And Mike's like, dude, like, I get what you're trying to do, but you're going to get caught. And he's like, no, I'm not. And Mike's like, dude, they're definitely going to check the cameras. He's like, cameras? And Mike's like, bro, the whole place has cameras. And at this point, right, the spoiled kid apparently had no idea. I guess he was just, like, so desperate to, like, get more time. He's like, all right, I'll just pull this and leave. And the spoiled kid's like, nah, dude, there's no cameras. Like, you're just making that up to scare me. And Mike's like, bro, there are cameras. And they're definitely going to check because they know the system will tell them it was this fire alarm that got pulled. And since there's no fire and it wasn't a drill, they're definitely going to check the cameras to see who pulled it so they can ask them why they pulled it. At this point, he's like, oh, no, like, oh, crap, like, there's no way. And it's as, like, Mike was saying this, that, like, you know, the police officers come out and they go into the building and the principal's out there and basically everyone with authority is there. And within 20 minutes, like, some people come out, they start talking to the principal. And at this point, the spoiled kid is, like, starting to freak out. He's like, dude, I didn't think I was going to get caught. Like, this is crazy. Can I just deny it? And Mike's like, you're going to deny video footage? What are you going to say? That it's, like, edited? That it's, like, a deep fake or something? Like, what are you going to say, bro? And he's like, I don't know. Like, I don't know what I'm going to say. And that's when, you know, this, like, the principal, one of the, like, the fire marshal and, like, some teachers start walking over to Mike. Start walking over to where Mike, the spoiled kid, and the rest of his class is. And as Mike's like, are they just coming over to say that we can go back inside? Like, very generally. But soon, Mike and the spoiled kid started to realize that, you know, they weren't walking towards every group, right? They weren't walking towards every group. They were walking towards the group that Mike and the spoiled kid were in. And they also noticed that one of, like, the teachers pointed in the direction of Mike and the spoiled kid. Like, they pointed, like, it pointed the finger, and it looked like it was right where the spoiled kid was. And Mike's like, oh, no, dude. And the spoiled kid's like, no, this cannot be happening. This cannot be happening, man. Like, this can't be happening. And Mike's like, I don't know what's going on. Like, I think it's just a coincidence. Turns out it's not a coincidence. The fire marshal, all the teachers, the principal, they walk over to the teacher, and, like, Mike can kind of hear, like, the principal or someone, like, whisper, like, we're going to need to talk to the spoiled kid for a second. And the teacher looks at the spoiled kid and kind of, like, turns back to the teacher or, like, the principal and shakes her head. And, yeah, so the fire marshal and the bunch of people, these adults, come over, and they walk over to the spoiled kid, and they're like, hey, like, do you mind, like, can we talk to you for a second? And the spoiled kid just has this look on his face of just pure panic, dread, and I'm screwed, bro. Like, that kind of look, perfectly encapsulated or crystallized by his expression. It was perfect. And, yeah, Mike was like, oh, man, this is not good. However, you might be thinking this must be the end of the story. No, Mike gets roped into this. And because eventually, like, 10 minutes later, spoiled kid is not back. However, someone walks out and says, like, gives kind of the all clear, people can go back, there was no fire, there was nothing like that. So everyone kind of files back to the classroom. So, you know, Mike gets back to his classroom, the test is still sitting at his desk, and the teacher says, hey guys, we have like 5 minutes left of class. I can't say that the test is, like, look, you got to promise me you can't go back. Don't look up stuff online. It's going to be, I can't do anything about it because I need to give you more time to finish this. It wouldn't be fair otherwise. And I'm also not going to just write up a whole new test, but just promise me you're not going to go home and look stuff up. It's all on your word. Like, I can't stop you, but don't do that. And obviously a bunch of people in the class were going to do it either way, but Mike's like, okay, like whatever, like, okay, I'm given another opportunity. Let's not mess this up. And that's when, as he's about to leave the classroom, because like eventually the teacher's like, all right, you can leave a couple minutes early. It's not like there's any point of you still being here. And the class is like, all right, thank you. We'll see you tomorrow. So everyone's getting up to leave. And that's when Mike, who's getting up to leave to go home because it's towards the end of the day, this teacher walks in and kind of goes up to the teacher, whispers something. And then Mike's teacher says, hey, Mike, can you stay for a second? And Mike's like, what? And so the person who walked up is like, and the teacher kind of points at Mike. So this faculty, staff person, whatever, comes over to Mike, says, hey, like, can we talk to you for a second? And Mike's like, yeah, sure. What's up? And he says, well, actually, can you just come to the principal's office? This will hopefully not be that. It'll be hopefully be quick, maybe. Mike's like, okay. So at this point, Mike's mind is racing. Because he's like, what could this be? Like, why am I being asked? I didn't cheat. I didn't pull the fire alarm. I didn't do anything. Like, I get it. I didn't study for the test. But, like, first of all, how would the teacher know that? And I'm already going to be punished by a bad grade. Like, what's the meaning of this? So they get to the principal's office, and the spoiled kid is sitting there. The principal's there. The fire marshal's there. And everyone's basically there. And the principal's like, so, spoiled kid, like, he admitted that you and him pulled the fire alarm. And Mike's like, what? And he looks at the spoiled kid, and the spoiled kid refuses to make eye contact. So Mike's mind is like racing because he's like, okay, this kid just like, he didn't rat me out because I didn't do anything. He just made something up. I don't know why he would like bring me into this as well. And the teacher's like, this is a really huge offense. Like, it will go in your permanent record. You will most definitely be suspended. There's a chance you'll be expelled. Like, this is really big. We're definitely calling your parents after this. And Mike's like, whoa. Mike's like, says, I just didn't do it. I didn't pull. And he's like, and they're like, well, you know, we didn't catch you on the camera doing it. The spoiled kid said that you and him had a plan together. So while you might not be getting as strict of a punishment as the spoiled kid, you're still going to be punished for planning something that was super disruptive today and wasted the fire department's time. Then he got like a 5-minute lecture from the fire marshal of like how there's actual fires going on and people who need to be saved, and like 30 minutes to an hour was like wasted, and like someone could have been hurt during that or even worse. And you know, Mike at the end of it says like, hey, can I talk to the spoiled kid privately? And they said, like, okay. I mean, like, whatever. And the spoiled kid was like, you could see on his face that he did not want to have this conversation. So they open up like an office room or whatever, and they say, you got a couple minutes, like, you guys can talk it out, like, that's fine. They close the door, and Mike's like, dude, why? And the spoiled kid just like isn't responding. And Mike's like, come on, like, you know I didn't do anything. And the spoiled kid doesn't respond. He's like, just give me an answer. And the spoiled kid's like, fine, like, I'm sorry, I panicked. I didn't want to go through this together. I thought like the blame would be less if there's 2 people involved. He said, it's obviously not. I'm sorry. And Mike's like, well, you can tell them that you made that part up. And the spoiled kid's like, yeah, but then, you know, they're going to know I lie. And then why would they believe anything else I say? And Mike's like, I don't know, man, but this isn't my fault. Like, this isn't me. This isn't on me. Like, I know you were doing this for us, but that doesn't mean that I, like, gave it the approval. This doesn't mean that, like, I should be punished for it. Like, you have, like, please just think about it for a second, please. And as Mike is saying, like, please just think about this, the door opens up, and the teacher opens this, says, all right, guys, you got a couple of minutes, come back out here. So they're sitting down, and the teacher's like, or the principal's like, all right, well, Mike, we're going to call up your parents. We're going to tell them what happened, and then you can talk to them after we talk to them. Basically being like, we're going to tell them the crazy thing you did, and then you have to explain it to them immediately after. Especially, they're going to be super hysterical, and you get to talk to them because we don't want to deal with that. But as the principal's about to ring up Mike's parents, the spoiled kid's like, guys, please, like, can I say something? And they're all like, uh-huh. And the spoiled kid goes on to explain, like, that him and Mike were not really prepared for the test, and that Mike had nothing to do with him pulling the fire alarm, and that he had no idea, and that he thought that, like, if he was, like, in trouble with someone else, it'd be lesser. He said, like, it was messed up, but, like, I was under a lot of pressure, and that Mike did nothing. And the teachers are like, well, how do we know that Mike just didn't, like, tell you to do it. And, he's like, well, Mike did tell me, but he told me to do that because he didn't do it. And he's like, you guys also don't have any proof. The only proof you had for Mike was my word, and I'm now saying that that is invalid. And he's like, Mike didn't do anything. And they turn to Mike and they say, you're going to be in huge trouble if we find out otherwise, like even bigger than you would be now if you did it. And Mike's like, that's totally fine because I didn't do it. And they say, okay, you're free to go. So Mike was free to go. And he didn't get in any trouble. He actually ended up, Mike was like, felt kind of bad about like what happened with the teacher. And so he actually didn't look up any of the answers when he went back home. And it actually was fine because the teacher said, like, I'm sorry to everyone who prepared a lot. We're just going to start a whole new test in 2 weeks. I'm going to give you guys more time to study. Like, it was that fire alarm messed up the whole thing. And what ended up happening with the spoiled kid is he was suspended for a while. He had to write an apology to his teacher. He had to write an apology to the fire chief. He had to write like 5,000 essays, right? And but he didn't get expelled, and he didn't do anything like that after that. And the moral of the story is like, well, couple. One, study for your tests. Like, it's okay to make mistakes, but study for your tests. And also never take the easy way out, especially if it hurts other people. How's it going, everyone? Today we got a story of a spoiled kid who does very standard spoiled kid behavior, believes that, his parents' money is basically his, and tries to flex on this girl to impress her. And let me just, a little spoiler, it doesn't work. But yeah, let's just jump into the story before I lose you guys. And we're going to call the subscriber Cameron. So anyways, right, there was this new girl at Cameron's school who we're going to call Maya. This was like, I don't know, 8th grade or something like that. And, basically, is the start of the year. They didn't really get a lot of new kids, as it was mostly just kids in the neighborhood district type thing. And so it was kind of a rare occasion for there to be like a new person in the school. And, all the guys were like, oh my God, like it's a new girl. You know how that goes. Anyways, though, so, the guys were kind of talking with each other. And there's this kid called, the spoiled kid. We're going to call him the spoiled kid. If I give him a name, I'm going to forget the name. And then you guys are like, oh, why are you calling Jerry Tim? It's because I can't remember anything. My short-term memory is not that much better than a goldfish. So we're going with one name, okay? So anyways, right, the guys were talking at the dinner table, the lunch table. They were kind of chatting, and the spoiled kid's like, yo, new girl, beautiful, man. I'm going to try. And, the other guys being supportive because, you're supportive of the boys, even though this guy was kind of like on the edge of their friendship. What I mean by that is they didn't necessarily not like him, but they also weren't necessarily friends, just because he's had a lot of like, moments where you're like, is this kid a jerk or not? I can't really tell. But they were like friendly with him. So they were like, yeah, bro, like we got you. And he's like, hey, can you guys kind of like test are any of you guys kind of friendly with her? Like, or try to be, can you like test the waters? I want to try something, but just let me know. And this is a very valid way to go about it. You don't want to go in blind sometimes, even though sometimes it is better just to try. And so anyways, Cameron and some of the other guys were like, yeah, we'll see what we can do about it. Sure enough, one of the other guys at the table, we'll just call him Ben, because of course we're going to call him Ben. Ben was there, and, he was like, yeah, actually, I'm, like, friends with some of her friends, or the people that she's just becoming friends with. I'll definitely put in a good word. I'll see what's up, and I'll get back to you. So anyways, right, Ben goes and he, like, talks to the girls that are friends with with Maya. That's the name. If I didn't say it already, that's the name that we're going to give the new girl, Maya's new friends. And Ben goes and is like, hey, like, I have this friend, spoiled kid. This spoiled kid wasn't a bad-looking kid. And he seemed well enough put together, but obviously there were some deep-rooted insecurities that he was about to expose in the worst possible way. But he was like, yeah, spoiled kid's kind of interested. Like, can you talk to Maya, see if there's, like, any kind of, like, reciprocality involved? Like, any bit at all? And she's like, yeah. Or they're like, yeah, 100%, we'll get back to you. So sure enough, they talk to Maya, and, she's open to it. It's not like she's falling head over heels for this kid, but she's open to it. So Ben comes back to the lunch table a couple days later, and he shares the good news.
And I told you to stop dating my mom. It's weird.
Anyways, so Ben gets back to the table. He shares the good news,
And, all the kids are, like, kind of, like, excited, dapping up the spoiled kid. Even though they didn't, like him that much, he was still, like, they were all, like, kind of cool with him. And he was, like, trying to make an effort to be friends with him. So they're like, yeah, he's a little something at sometimes. Like, maybe arrogance the right word. Maybe it's not. I don't know. They were like, yeah, whatever. They were excited for him. He was sitting with them. So it was, it was a cool atmosphere. Things were good. So the spoiled kid was pretty excited about that. And he was, like, asking for some advice. They're like, okay, dude, just talk to her, which, shocker. I mean, I haven't learned that apparently yet. They don't just fall in love with you, man. You got to talk to them. Yeah, but anyways, right. He's like, okay, fine. I'll go talk to her. We'll see how this goes. The problem is, though, the spoiled kid was not super confident. And because of that, his insecurities started to show a little bit. And the spoiled kid's insecurities manifested in him kind of being a jerk, a huge, massive jerk face. I don't know how else to put it, but unfortunately for him, that's kind of how it happened. So Ben was kind of keeping tabs on how it was going because he was friends with Maya's friends. And Maya's friends at first were like, oh, it's good. Maya and him just talked recently. She says he's cute or whatever. Like, however girls talk. I don't know. But anyways, right. At a certain point, though, when Ben went to go talk to them, they were like, oh, well, about that, actually. It's going downhill a little bit. And Ben was like, oh, what do you mean it's going downhill a little bit? Like, what happened? And they were like, yeah, the spoiled kid, things were going pretty good. But apparently he was saying some stuff to Maya that was, like, kind of, like, turning her off, like, in a pretty big way. And Ben was like, oh, what did he say? And they were like, well, he started to talk about, like, what his dad did for a living, how he doesn't really need to worry about school because he can do whatever he wants, how, like, a life with him is, like, a life of security. And then, like, the main reason of that is because, like, he's chilling. How, like, he's got this really cool beach house, which I think the spoiled kid's mind was trying to, like, be like, I'm a good partner. You don't have to worry about things if you're with me. But then the way he was phrasing was pretty terrible. Like, oh, I don't have to try. Like, I'll be fine forever. Like, even if that's true, which is true for, like, 0.0006% of the population, like, just don't put it like that. Like, they'll eventually figure that out, but just don't say that and don't have that attitude, like, that kind of mindset, even if you got it like that, if you're not trying, if you're not ambitious, if you're not going after it, if you're not that type of person, like, it's going to be a big turnoff. So, Ben kind of, like, pulled the spoiled kid aside, kind of, like, separately, and kind of, like, was like, hey, like, you might want to chill with X, Y, and Z. And the spoiled kid was like, okay, sure. And unfortunately, though, the next time Ben went to go talk to Maya's friends, they were all like, yeah, man, I'm sorry. I don't think Maya's interested anymore. And Ben was like, but I told, like, the spoiled kid, like, to chill with that. And they're like, well, he must have just, like, not listened to you and did the opposite because she said it got worse. Just imagine what I was saying, like, that he was saying before, but now it's, like, twice as blatant, twice as, like, arrogant, twice as annoying. It was just ramping up, and Maya realized that this was just not for her. And unfortunately, or I guess I don't know, unfortunately to the spoiled kid's perspective, we'll say that, Ben, confronted him, was basically like, hey, I'm sorry, I got word that I don't think this is going to work out anymore. Spoiled kid was not very happy, but, I mean, I get it. Like, I mean, you kind of played yourself here, but yeah, it's sad, it's tough, but it is life, and you'll move on. So about, like, a month goes by. A long time goes by is what I'm trying to, like, emphasize here, that a lot of time happens. And, during that time, the spoiled kid is no longer pursuing, but, still, I don't know. He's just no longer pursuing actively. And, Cameron has had some good conversations with Maya and starts to think to himself, well, it's not like this is, it's not like, one, it's not like I'm close with the spoiled kid. Two, it's not like this is his ex-girlfriend. Like, he just shot a shot and failed. Like, that's not breaking bro code or anything. Very generally, to you younger viewers out there, there is, especially among, I'm not an English major. I put numbers together and try and make computers do stuff. I don't do English, man. for the gentleman out there, right? There's something called bro code. It kind of depends per unit of gentleman that it is enacted upon. However, very generally, you don't go after one of their sisters, okay, gentlemen, let's not do that. You also have to give a long time for one of their exes, and for many groups, you just never, ever do anything with an ex. And obviously with a current, like you don't need bro code to know that. Generally, if you stick by those rules, you will be fine. So when, Cameron pulled up the bro code doctrine right next to his trusty Declaration of Independence in his pocket, because those are of equal value and equal written instructional, I don't even know, right? He pulls it out, and he's like, you know what? This doesn't matter. I think I'm going to try and pursue her. And sure enough, word gets around pretty quickly, that Cameron's trying to pursue her. And once again, he also goes to Ben, because Ben is the plug, apparently. And Ben, talks to her friends, and Maya's interested. And the thing is, Cameron isn't a big douche? I don't know. Is that like, are you guys going to get mad at me? Is that like a bad word or something? I mean, okay, kids, don't say that if you're in kindergarten or something, please. But yeah, that's the best way to describe it. Cameron wasn't like that. So it was starting to go pretty well. And that's when, the spoiled kid started to overhear this. Started to hear a little bit about this. Started to, listen to what was going on. And wasn't that happy, believe it or not. Yeah, so the spoiled kid overhears this, and he gets all big grumpy or whatever. He gets big mad. I don't even know, right? And so one day, Cameron and Maya are just sitting at lunch together because, they've started to talk a lot. They're not officially anything, but anyone, unless Cameron is to fumble horrendously, which I do know some Camerons that would probably fumble horrendously, unless he's to do that, right, then things are probably going to look like they might start becoming something more official. And the spoiled kid knows this. And so while they're sitting at lunch one day, just the two of them at the table, very nice, right? Congrats. Making moves, man. The spoiled kid walks over to their table. And the thing is, right, Cameron wasn't not cool with the spoiled kid, but he also wasn't necessarily friends. They would occasionally sit at the same lunch table. I don't know if you guys have this at school, but, you kind of I used to do this a lot. I would sit at a lunch table or dinner table, and there would be mostly guys I know, but also some guys that were just friends with some of the guys I know that would sit there, and I was always friendly with them, but I wouldn't hit them up and be like, hey, what are you doing today, right? I would be friendly with them, I'd be cool with them, but I wouldn't necessarily call them a good friend. They would probably go under the category of acquaintance or something like that. But anyways, right, the spoiled kid walks up to them, and Cameron looks up and is like, what's up? That's a very, that makes sense. That makes sense of a question, right? Some just random kid comes up to you that you kind of know and is just looking at the table of you and and kind of in the back of his head, Cameron's remembering oh yeah, spoiled kid liked her at the beginning of the year, and he kind of dropped the bag or whatever. But Cameron does not expect what is about to come next. Today we're sponsored by Rage. I'm kidding. I don't get sponsors that much. But anyways, subscribe though if you're new. And basically the spoiled kid comes up, and he walks up to Cameron and Maya, and they're sitting there, and they kind of look at him, and he looks back or whatever, and he's just looking. He doesn't look at Cameron, right? He turns directly and looks at Maya, and he's like, so I see you've made your choice then. They both kind of look at the spoiled kid back what's this kid talking about? Because they kind of have, when something really, when you're completely confused and you start making some guesses in your head, and you have 2 and 3, 2 to 3 guesses, it could be this, could be that. One of the guesses was that, that he was talking about, how he used to like Maya or whatever, and it didn't work through. But they didn't even put that as the number one guess because it was so out of the blue. And he's like, so, you've chosen him. Let me just tell you something about him versus me. And the spoiled kid goes on to have a massive rant / freak out breakdown type event about how he his father is financially he will be able to sustain generations, and that Maya should have chose him because, the incredible vacations they would have gone on together and the life that they could have lived would have been significantly better than any life that, Cameron could have ever given to her. Cameron is like, hey, chill. You don't know what I'm going to do with my life, bro. Like, come on now. He doesn't say that, but that's what he's thinking. He's not trying to get involved in nonsense like this. And and the spoiled kid is like ranting and ranting and ranting about like how she made a terrible choice. They're going on and on and on and on. And that's when, like, in the middle of one of his rants, Maya stops him and is like, she was like, you just clearly explained why I didn't choose you. And like it was just like dead silent for a second. The spoiled kid's like, well, I don't understand. I just explained why you should have chosen me. And Maya's like, no, you just explained to me why I didn't choose you. And the spoiled kid isn't getting it, but Cameron immediately is like, whoa, okay, this is like, because like Cameron heard from Ben that like, oh, well, the spoiled kid was kind of being like arrogant or a jerk or whatever, and that's why Maya stopped talking to him. Cameron didn't really understand what that meant, but he really did understand what that meant now. And the spoiled kid's like, no, I don't get it. I don't think you understand. You need me to say it again. And Maya's like, no, I heard you I heard you clear. Like, you just explain, like, think about it for a second. So the spoiled kid very angrily walks off. And from that point on, the spoiled kid did not make any more attempts. I think the spoiled kid probably eventually figured out what Maya was trying to say. But, I mean, who knows, man? He was pretty delusional for saying that in the first place. Maya and Cameron, they don't actually end up dating or anything like that. It just didn't follow through. They just remain friends. I think that's what I was told in the Instagram DM. Submit your stories to me on Instagram or Twitter. Just DM me. Please also be following me because I like big numbers next to my name. And I'm more likely to take your story if you do because that's just how it is. Anyways, the next story is about, if I had to title this next story, it would be Her Dad Punched Me in the Face. So I think that you'll enjoy this one, so you should probably stick around if you got a second. We're going to call this subscriber Clarence. And anyways, right, Clarence had a school project with a girl in his class. And he didn't know this girl that well, but whatever, he knew her well enough that, it wasn't that awkward or anything. And the thing was, this was a project that was supposed to be done over the weekend and not during school hours. Or not during, like, class hours. I guess you could do it during school or whatever. But it was a big enough project that they needed to do it on the weekend, and Clarence and the girl kind of came to the conclusion that the best idea was to do this thing together at one of their houses. And the girl says, hey, why don't you come over to my house this weekend? Because they all lived in, like, the same neighborhood, literally, like, a walk away, like a 10, 15-minute walk. Clarence was totally fine doing that. So anyways, Clarence, gets his stuff, puts in his bag, and he walks over, and he's kind of, like, texting the girl, like, hey, I'm 5 minutes away. And she's like, cool. And he gets there, he's like, hey, I'm outside, opens the door, and Clarence immediately notices, like, as he's walking up, that there's no cars in the driveway. When he gets there, there's no parents in the house. And he's like, hey, like, I see your parents aren't home. And she's like, yeah, they'll be back eventually, but, yeah, they're just not here right now. And he's like, they know I'm here, right? And she's like, yeah, I guess. I think I mentioned it. They won't care. Turns out they did care, but you'll see that in a second. So anyways, they get down and they're starting to work on this project. They're sitting, just to kind of like paint the picture, they're sitting at the kitchen table, and they just have all this like school supplies and product and whatever out there. Because I think they're making a project. So it's not like a Google Doc where you kind of had to... not where you had to, like a Google Doc where you could have easily done it at home and you didn't have to be there together. It was like a physical project, so they kind of needed to be in the same place. So they were putting something together, and that's when the door opens. And it is this girl's dad. And this girl is like, hey, like, I don't know, Kate, I'm home or whatever. And then immediately, when his dad makes eye contact with Cameron, who expects that he knows that this is just some guy from school, his face completely turns. He's like, hey, who are you? And at this point, like, Kate is like starting to be like, he's like, no, Dad, it's not what you think. So it turns out that, Kate's dad has a very, very, very strict no dating, no boyfriend, no boys, you do what you want in college, but under my roof, that's not happening type attitude, and is very, very, very intense with it. As you'll see, very intense with it. And her dad starts to pushes right by Kate, sorry, that's a name from a previous story. I get it mixed up sometimes. And she's like, no, dad, no, you don't understand. That's, he's from school. And he's like, I don't care where this boy is from school. No boys are allowed in my house. And he goes up and he's being all big guy or whatever to Clarence. He's like, so you think you can just mess with my daughter and not get messed up from me? And Clarence is just no, yeah, understand. I'm just here for a school project. I have, boom, slaps him directly across the face and get out of my house. And Clarence is just shocked that he just got slapped across the face and is being yelled at to leave the house. So he does. He doesn't want the smoke, he doesn't want to deal with this. This is a waste of his time. So he gets up and he kind of angrily leaves. And Kate's like, oh, wait outside, I'll explain this. And her dad's like, you better, if you're on my lawn in the next 60 seconds, I'm coming out there. And he steps out there and he waits. Clarence is like, all right, I'm going to wait out here for a little bit, but then I am going to go if I see this guy walk out because he's crazy. And so Clarence doesn't actually hear what Kate says inside, but Kate tells him after the fact, so I'm going to add this into the story now like he did. Basically, Kate explained to her dad, Dad, it's not my boyfriend. I barely know this kid. We have a class assignment. It's due Monday. We need to work on it over the weekend. If you don't believe me, then why are all these school supplies on the table? And her dad, who is calming down because it was a big emotional thing, notices that, yeah, why are all this stuff on the table? And this is a guy I've never seen before. And, he seemed to be pretty confused why I was mad. And eventually, Kate's dad realizes, this is just some kid. I just slapped some kid in the face and screamed at him to get out of my house when he was just working on a project with my daughter. I kind of seem like the crazy one here. So Kate opens the door because, Clarence was gonna just turn around and start power walking away if Kate's dad came out and opened the door or whatever. Kate opens the door, says, hey, I am so incredibly sorry. He's like, okay. And Kate's like, hey, look, we still got to finish the project. I talked to my dad. He gets it now. He's really embarrassed. Come on in. I promise nothing will happen. Clarence is like, well, you also said that, nothing was going to happen before and that they knew that I was here, but okay, fine. Because Clarence is not super happy right now. I don't think I'd be super happy. His face is still red, from being slapped. He's still shaken up from the whole thing. So it happened in the span of 45 seconds. And he gets in there, and, the dad's in the other room, just embarrassed, whatever. So they sit down, they keep working on the project, and they're kind of working on it in almost dead silence, except, before they were having a nice conversational chat just to be, friendly or whatever. But now Clarence was not helping it. He was not trying in the friendly conversation. Clarence would only speak when necessary, I need you to pass the scissors, or what do you think we should do here? So yeah, it was pretty awkward. But about 45 minutes in, the dad kind of very timidly walks in the room and is like, hey, buddy, I'm sorry about that. I just get a certain way when I think my daughter's dating someone. And Clarence kind of looks at him, is like, okay. He doesn't say you're fine. He just says, okay. His dad's like, yeah, I'm just going to come in and get some water and I'll leave you two. I'll leave you two at it, right? Clarence is kind of just keeping an eye on him in the corner of his eye. He's like, I'm not letting this guy out of my sight because all he knows is he's going to come behind him and strangle him with a plastic bag or who knows, right? And, the dad walks out of the room, obviously very embarrassed by what just happened. And, that was Clarence and Kate finished the thing up. And sure enough, it's a good project. They get an A on it. But as they're leaving, Kate's like, look, I'm so sorry again. Could you please, not tell anyone about this? And, at this point, Clarence wasn't happy with either of them. mostly the dad, right? But didn't want to start anything, just didn't feel like that was necessary. So it was like, sure, this happened 2 years or 3 years ago. Clarence, who it's not his real name, felt like, okay, I can at least tell a channel if it's like a story channel if it's anonymous, right? So if you want to submit your own stories, Instagram, Twitter down below. Help me out, watch another video. Bye. Click on the video on screen right now. I know you'll enjoy it. Just click it, do it.